Welcome to Cyber Ahead with AI, the podcast where we explore how AI is transforming cybersecurity from strategy to execution and what's really working for today's leaders. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Jonathan King, a 20-year veteran in K through 12 e-safety education. He's advised school districts across the country, worked with the FTC, the White House, and legislators on safe, responsible online use. Jonathan, great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, cybersecurity used to feel very abstract. Now it seems every family is getting phishing texts and weird links and random calls. And with AI, the speed and realism of these threats jump, and the tools for learning can get way better. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. What we used to teach students has really changed as it pertains to cybersecurity practices, right? We used to just focus on spam emails and phishing and farming attacks, but quite candidly, the sophistication of cybersecurity attacks now within school systems and the frequency is just incredibly different. We had the highest level of attacks on school districts primarily because of student data this past year. Let's take that in consideration, right? And why would an individual that's looking for to create an impact within schools, why would that happen from a cybersecurity posture perspective? Quite candidly, it's because the data is so incredibly attractive. If we can get access to student data, that is kids under the age of 18, and quite candidly, that data is very meaningful financially for a perpetrator. Why? Because when's the first time a child actually checks their identity, right? It's when they get their first credit card, go out for their loan for their car, or they're going to go to college and they need a loan. Quite candidly, right? It's a very attractive opportunity for individuals trying to seek out that kind of data set and then to be utilized. That's the reason why on the black market, right, a traditional adult identity can sell between $2 to $10, but a child's identity can sell in the hundreds of dollars because
Oh, wow.
it will not be checked upon. It's a very interesting problem that school systems are confronted with because on one end, you have this incredibly growth curve around technology adoption, the decrease in textbooks and the move into apps and making sure that we have personalized learning and using technology to a wonderful attribute, while at the same time, they have a declining IT staff with a diminishing set of resources that are now trying to block and impede individuals from trying to get access to that student data. So it's a really interesting conundrum for sure.
Wow. Thanks for painting that picture. And so I think today's conversation will be great because we'll be able to separate the fear from the facts. And so what is the everyday threat picture for a typical student? What's actually hitting inboxes or DMs or their phones right now?
Well, primarily it's traditional just garnering information. Second, fraudulent procurement of goods and services, right? Or third, a traditional phishing and farming attack, which kids are much more mindful and insightful about blocking than they were just 5 to 10 years ago. So it's really interesting when you have native learners that have been on technology devices, their discernment level is already better, which is really great, right?
That's amazing.
The flip side is that the volume that they get versus back in the day is incredibly more. So maybe sometimes it's the volume that's increasing it, or secondarily, this level of more thoughtful discernment plays a role. But at the end of the day, it's a really interesting challenge because these are going to evolve. And unfortunately, that evolution is going to be, I think, much more challenging for individuals to really kind of get an eye set on how to block and how to impede that information.
Right. Interesting. And so, how do you educate or tell like a 10 to 14-year-old? You said that they almost have a better understanding of this, but how do you go about educating these young kids about what's the right behavior and what they shouldn't be clicking on?
Yeah, from an iSafe perspective, and not to sound like a sales guy, because I'm not, but what we provide is core curriculum materials that are grade specific, age appropriate for grades K through 12, on a litany of e-safety education topics, from cybersecurity that we're talking about today to Web 2.0, cell phone safety, intellectual property theft, cyberbullying, griefing, and esports, kind of the whole gamut of what it means to be a digital native in today's society and be thoughtful and a good cyber citizen in those engagement opportunities. We have a very interesting challenge where our native users now have grown up with cell phones, instantaneous access. The dopamine hit when that cell phone rings is ingrained now in their DNA. And quite candidly, the flip side of that conversation is that really trying to go back to making sure that individuals know that it's still just a tool, right, at the end of the day. And that tool is there to in our environment, the education environment, right, to educate and empower students to be safe and responsible online, while at the same time growing efficacy and knowledge about certain variety of topics. So if we really try to like create a juxtaposition, like this is our goal and objective, the nexus point or the North Star, as a lot of people like to say, then at the end of the day, that should be the North Star, using technology in an effective way to reach our ultimate goal, and that is knowledge.
I love that you said that. And, you know, oftentimes there's this bifurcation, right? AI is cheating, or, hey, AI is here to help. What's the middle path that I guess schools and parents should be taking?
It's a good question, and one that I get confronted with almost on a daily basis now, which is really crazy to me. You have like these two forms of thought, almost like two gladiators coming together on this respective topic, because it's really fascinating. Old school methodology practices looking at how sometimes AI can be indiscretionate, right? Like provides opportunities for people to cheat, or more importantly, to get darn information, to write papers for them, or to get the math question slash answer more effectively and easily. What we really don't recognize, though, is the new formal wave of thought as it relates to garnering traditional efficacy around the way people think. What I mean by this is this, quite simply. People want to block AI because they're afraid of the tool. They're afraid the tool actually will allow a student to kind of circumvent the system of knowledge. I get it. I understand. What about flipping the model? Teaching students how to use AI to what? Build flashcards, to build practice exams, to teach the curriculum asset in alignment with the learning modality that they are formed to learn from. So I can instantaneously change that history book, which I might not be great at because I don't enjoy history. But if I turn it into a podcast using Gemini on the same chapter that I have to study, lo and behold, I'm an auditorial learner, and now I'm kicking butt and taking names. That mindset change and actually leaning into educators, that's the key. Leaning into educators and using professional development as a model to teach teachers to teach using AI. It's a very different, fundamentally switch in the mindset of the education environment. But quite candidly, the beauty about doing that is that we're going to move away from this. Let's block. Let's not use this. It's bad. It's nefarious. It has this negative attribute. And flipping it to like, no, if I can teach my own students to learn material more effectively, what's going to allow me to do? Test scores go up, efficacy goes up, and I can now start acquiring new information and new knowledge that's going to get me out of the traditional foundational information and into something that's much more specialized and actually probably more interesting for the students holistically.
I love that flip of the script because to me, it seems like the mediums of learning are changing, but the concept of learning is very much just the same. We're just staying with the trend and better enabling teachers and students to leverage something that's only going to help them, I guess, take in more knowledge
That's right.
ultimately.
Yeah. It's so funny. We always think about the tokens of AI, right? How do we have to like, it's the race for compute. Well, what about we flip it and go like, it's the race for efficacy. It's the race for change of getting knowledge that's discernful and mindful to the individual. The personalization of that information so it can be quickly assessed, quickly ingested, quickly then turned around to an efficacy that actually allows you to then get procurement information that's now out loud and extrovertedly communicate that I know this information. What's wrong with flipping the script on that too? Because at the end of the day, that's actually what we do in classrooms, right? Teacher stands there Socratically, gives a 7-point lesson plan, and then what? Writes an exam, either a bubble or traditional essay form. And why? Because we're trying to learn if the child or the student is much more knowledgeable now on that respective topic. So if we're able to do that more effectively using AI and flip compute to actually efficacy, then we're going to be in a much better position as a society, let alone like as a school system.
I love the way you think. So, little rapid fire round. If you could rapid fire a playbook for teachers, parents, and districts, what would be your recommendations for each of those stakeholders?
Good question. It's a tough one too, because we have this really interesting multi-threaded problem. The multi-threaded problem is that intergenerationally, we're stuck. People are still using Chrome browsers versus trying to find an AI tool that might be actually could be integrated now, right? So it's really funny, like to think about like just the little stuff. First and foremost, I think, is the protection of data holistically. That's probably an answer you weren't anticipating because you're probably thinking about the vertical market versus the actual outcome. I'm going to flip it to the outcome.
Nice.
And the reason why I'm going to do that is because compliance is a problem. Compliance is a big problem for school districts, a big problem for parents, and most importantly, a big problem for students. Let me give you an example. Got this wonderful application, brand new, in the market, math tutoring solution. Super cool. Kids want to adopt it because you know what? It's amazing. We'll just call it like Math Exostar. Like it's cutting edge, straight to the stars, right? And so we want to deploy this within schools. And we also have like this market where we're like trying to think: is it tutoring, non-tutoring? We're all we know is that we're gonna like elevate, right? We're gonna put rocket boosters on this thing so kids become knowledgeable. So as kids go on the website, and now since it's a website and it's like education based, but we get some virtual goods. We're like, we have to go through COPPA compliance, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So now means that we have to put an gauge in front of that. And now we have to talk about, as an app vendor, the friction of actually onboarding that student into this really amazing tool that we've spent time, effort, energy to deploy because we have actually a very mindful and thoughtful way that we want to educate kids. But at the same time, recognize we need to follow the law. So we put an age gate there. There's our first challenge. Parents have already taught their children, or more importantly, children know for themselves. Like, if I want to do something really cool, like get on the social media platform or go to Sora and build my little viral video assets, what do? I just lie. I lie about my age and know where to get access. Our first compliance challenge. Our second compliance challenge, quite simply, is parents don't want to be burdened with this, and they don't see the value proposition of actually providing traditional verifiable parental consent. That is, a child going in there, giving them the real birth date, having an email go out to their respective parent, or the parent playing a process and creating their own account for which they can then facilitate to give to the child and tether the two. So what happens is that now we're actually essentially undermining this whole incredible landscape of legislation that's been put in place in order to protect kids and the student data that's associated with them. Let alone we don't have a dossier of any imagination for parents. So they have no idea that they're not only they've been on Math Exostar that we just created whimsically out of the air, but we don't know that they're on Facebook or Insta or TikTok, etc. We have no idea because we don't have a full dossier of all those respective application sets, let alone VPC. And then we provide even a more challenging issue for school systems. School systems through COPPA compliance FAQ 5N can actually communicate on behalf of parents and provide verifiable parental consent. So what does that mean? That means they can act like the parent and say, yep, Math Exostar is super cool for our students. No problem. We're going to onboard those kids, give the data of that child to that application that we just, again, fictitiously created in order to onboard them on our environment because we see the value proposition. And now Math Exostar goes back to the board and they go, you know what we need to do? We need to start selling more tutoring services. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to make it because we don't have the value. So we have to change our business model. And in doing so, what happens? We now become just not an education technology platform. We become an edutainment platform. And now the school system can't give that VPC away, but they've already done it. And who's going to oversee that and to what capacity? So this whole compliance, I'm painting a story for you on purpose because I want to show you that compliance is actually very challenging. And it impacts student data if it's ever breached. Parents who want to actually ultimately support their child, but if it's not fiduciarily aligned with them, they kind of let it go. And then school districts that have a huge implication because of the amount of breaches that are occurring at school districts, the protection of that student data, and the recognition that they are in the student business of educating them. It's a really interesting tripod of compliance support that needs to really be thought and much more imaginative about a solution that is clear, concise, and can help support all three.
And so, how do people tackle this today?
Well, right now, it's age gates primarily, and there are some interesting tools that they're trying to deploy, like Yachty is a good example of that, where it's a biometrical solution, an AI biometrical solution, trying to identify if I could just use the facial recognition patterns of a person, if I can actually give a value proposition that child's under the age of a certain demographic. We'll just call it 12 and under, this example. But, legislation is not cut up to these solutions, right? Yachty went for a safe harbor and they were denied. Why? Because the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act communicates very clearly you need verifiable parental consent. You don't need an artificial intelligence age verifying solution. So it's really interesting how it's going to take a new technology and new thought in order to actually create an interesting point where we can come together and think about compliance very differently. Because we need to make sure that students are protected holistically, while at the same time put the power back in the hands of parents.
Wow. So this industry is shaping up as we speak, and there's going to be changes, but we don't know yet. And we just have to
Exactly.
circumvent what's already in place. So seems like we have some old processes, but now, we have to kind of change our mindset with how we look at compliance in this new realm of AI.
Well, iSafe sits on the front of that. We have a tool that actually binds the parent-child relationship, has authentication touches for students, parents, educators, and staff to help facilitate a way that children can be onboarded in those respective ecosystems.
That's amazing. Tell me a little bit more about what you do at iSafe.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're essentially working with school systems to get traditional VPC. So verified parental consent. So that school district that wants to use ExoStar but recognize ExoStar might have changed, right? They might be now handing out digital goods or might be handing out I don't know, scholarships. So people might question like, uh-oh, what is this? This is outside the purview, just like the education curriculum content. Well, in those situations, all a school system does is put a new ExoStar in this example, permission slip out to parents. Parents go in there, they authenticate they are who they say they are through that binding of that parent-child relationship. And more specifically, iSafe's a proprietary way that we bind those respective users, and then they give their permission. That child can participate with that respective technology platform. It's super cool. It's super easy to use and operate and falls within the current legislative mandate of COPPA compliancy. Where I think it's going to be really fun is like airports. How many times have you seen a child on their iPad under the age of 12 get on the free Wi-Fi and not think about the implications of that? And did they get parental approval to before they actually put personal data into that respective application? No. And is that a COPPA violation? Yes. And so what do we do to fix that? And let alone think about high capacity venues. Everything is becoming much more tech forward, tech friendly. So how do we make sure that parents can provide VPC effectively and efficiently as quickly as possible?
That's awesome. It's like multi-factor authentication, but with the parents involved, huh?
Exactly. It really is just that. And that's the goal. The goal is
Which is what? That's good. That's good user experience. We know that even a basic thing like multi-factor authentication goes so long. Gone are the days that you lost one password, you're in trouble if you don't have MFA. And MFA solves that problem.
absolutely. Yeah, it's gonna be fun, I think, just talking out loud now, like, how does quantum computing play a role in this process? Because as we all know, right, password usage is completely null and void just because
Yep.
of the way that that computing power exists.
And the encryption of the data, it needs to be quantum proof.
Yeah.
We need to save that for our next episode.
Sounds like a game plan. Sounds like a game plan.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, this was so much fun. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Any tips, tricks that you want to share with the listeners?
I would just lean into technology, and you're going to be okay. And then have a be discernful as it relates to anyone asking for information on your child and onboarding them into your environment. So therefore, you can be much more thoughtful about the areas that your child is going and the data that they're actually collecting on your respective child as well. So if there's anything I would go with, I always go with optimism, right? I think that's really important because it's really easy from as a technologist to think about, again, the nefarious activities that exist on the web because they're so incredibly rampant. The flip side is though, there's incredible opportunity if you just lean into the right places and really think about what your ultimate goal is. And if your ultimate goal is knowledge, there's no better place than to find it, obviously with a purveyor on the web.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's really a great way to, glass half full way of looking at both the growth of your child and kind of what's coming up in the industry. And so if anyone wants to learn about iSafe, where should they go?
Really simple. You just go to www.isafeventures.com. That's iSafe Ventures with the letter I, Safe Ventures plural.com. And then have at it and go in there and take a look at our solutions that we have. And if you want to bring this out to your school system, there's obviously a contact form to make that happen. And we're most appreciative of all your parents' efforts to kind of bring technology and technology adoption to schools. It's been a real pleasure to have speaking with you today. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And, until the next episode, I guess we'll talk about quantum. But thanks for taking the time, Jonathan. And to
Yeah.
all the listeners, thanks for tuning into another episode of Cyber Ahead with AI.
Thank you.